Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the channel. It is 6:45 a.m. East Coast time, Monday, September 30th. Hopefully you all had a good weekend. Hopefully you all had a good Sunday. So far, back-to-back good weekends in the NFL for myself. Shout out Wayne Gallman yesterday. Pretty good day all around. But here, we're on a Monday night slate that actually is a pretty good showdown slate based on the way that Draftkings did these pricings. And another $300,000 to first. So I'm going to break it down. I have a player pool that I feel good about right now, 13 players. If you've been watching, you know I like to get that down to about 10 or 12 for a showdown slate. I'll have my tiers out on Patreon later today. And yeah, if this is your first time here, my name is Sal Vetri. I do cover daily fantasy sports in the NFL, MLB, WNBA, and NBA, 3 weeks away from the NBA. And I am excited and I love it. And we just crossed 10,000 subscribers last week. Merchandise, apparel, whatever you want to call it, is now available. There'll be some things getting added to it. You can click the link down below. It might actually pop up down below. I'm not sure how YouTube does that. And then in the description, there's a lot of things. There's the free strategy guides. There's my exclusive content over on Patreon where I do a ton of stuff all week long. A final podcast on Sunday now, a live stream on Wednesday, Friday ownership show, my projections, all of my stat sheets, and everything is in there. So you can check that out if you want. Twitter, @SalVetriDFS. And yeah, let's get into the slate. I think this is a very good slate. I think there's spots in here that you can capitalize, and I'm a little bit confused by some of the price points on players. I don't even want to wait to get to the player that I want to talk to right away because there's probably 2 or 3 of them, but the one that I really want to stress is Tyler Boyd. Look, Tyler Boyd's been having a fantastic season. He's been in the slot so far this year just around 62% of his snaps. It's 68% of the snaps last week, 62% on the entire season. So almost a third of the snaps this year in the slot, and we know how beneficial the slot is. Also, by the way, hit the subscribe button if you're watching. We're about to hit 11,000 subscribers, and I'll be live tonight breaking down this slate at 6:15 for about 45 minutes to an hour. So be sure to come back then. Hit the notification bell. It'll let you know when I go live. But yeah, Tyler Boyd, he's going to get to avoid Joe Hayden. In the slot. He's going to get to, for the most part, avoid Minkah Fitzpatrick, and new addition from the Dolphins to the Steelers secondary, because he'll be running short to intermediate routes. The big thing here, though, with Tyler Boyd is not only his success in the slot and the way that Zach Taylor, the new Bengals coach, is using him. Zach Taylor, old coach from the Rams from 2017 and 18, a quarterback and wide receivers coach, and he's using Tyler Boyd as Robert Woods, and that bodes well if you look at Robert Woods' transformation from when he was a Buffalo receiver to when he came to the Rams the final couple of years. But yeah, Tyler Boyd's been fantastic, but the biggest piece of this is the fact that he's facing the Steelers, who have given up over 100 yards a game to the slot position, who have given up a touchdown per game, yes, 3 so far this year, to slot wide receivers. And you know why the Steelers stink against slot wide receivers? It's because they try and cover them with linebackers. I'm not kidding. No, this is 2019, and Steelers defensive coaches are still trying to cover wide receivers, slot wide receivers, who are usually some of the most gifted receivers in the league now that offensive coordinators know to put the slot wide receiver in the slot because, well, you just get a better matchup. Yeah, the Steelers are still trying to assume that this is a tight end. Keenan Allen, I mean, you saw it last year, the end of the year before. Keenan Allen, the Steelers were guarding with a linebacker late into the game when he was going off for like 150 yards against them. They still just guard a slot receiver. They've done it this year with a tight end. Or with a linebacker. So if you're going to put a linebacker on Tyler Boyd in the slot, it's an easy game for him. $9,200 Tyler Boyd, my opinion, is mispriced by somewhere near $1,000 for this matchup. Tyler Boyd might be the best overall captain on the slate. I think there's some other viable ones, but he's just really, really juicy this week. So I wanted to make sure I got that out of the way right away because, yeah, he's a spot that stands out to me as, look, even if you don't have him in your captain spot, if I play 10 lineups tonight, I'm probably having Tyler Boyd in 8 to 10 of them in my flex spot just because of how good this matchup is and how good Tyler Boyd has been this year. Like, Tyler Boyd's floor games so far this year have been like 6 catches for 80 yards. 6 catches for 80 yards at 9,200 is probably needed in your flex spot to win something tonight, even if he doesn't find the end zone. So that's the main spot that I wanted to touch on. Another spot that I want to touch on is the tight end position for the Steelers, and then we'll get into just the rest of the people player by player. So tight end position, Vance McDonald seems to be doubtful. They already put Xander Grimble, their backup tight end, to start the year on IR. So they had to pretty much emergency trade for Nick Vannett from Seattle. Nick Vannett, I believe, is due to play in this one, but he's more of a blocking tight end. The only other tight end on the roster is Zach Gentry. Zach Gentry is a tight end that was converted from a wide receiver. He played well in the preseason, scored a touchdown, but Zach Gentry's biggest issue is the fact that he stinks at blocking. Nick Vannett is very good at blocking, so I think what we have here, and I have Zach Gentry right now as a yes because he's only $400, you have by far the better pass-catching tight end as Zach Gentry over Nick Vannett. It's not even close, the athleticism that Zach Gentry has. He very much reminds me of Jesse James, the former Steeler tight end, who is now very underrated tight end in the league, who is now backing up the rookie TJ Hawkinson in Detroit, I believe. But Zach Gentry, the issue for him is, look, he played 10 snaps last week after not playing a snap all season once Vance McDonald sort of got banged up. I do see, and that was about 19% of the snaps, I do see Zach Gentry seeing a third of the field tonight, or a third of the snaps tonight at tight end, if not more, depending on if they're trailing in this game and need more pass catchers out there. The issue for him, though, is blocking. But if you don't put him out there with the responsibility to chip and block and then go out for a pass, and you're just putting him out there in the slot, well, he doesn't have to block then. So I think that Gentry at $400 is an interesting play. It's a spot that I'll have a few shares of him in my lineups because the top two Steelers on this tight end are done. They're going to be hurt. Vance McDonald downfield, no Grimble. And then you have Nick Vannett, who's not a guy who's really going to be used heavily in a receiving game, more so as a blocking game. And if this game turns into something where the Steelers are not expected to be down, as they're 3.5, 4.5 point favorites now, it opened at 3.5, I believe. But if at any reason they need to be passing and using more pass catchers on the field, I think Gentry just gets onto the field more. $400, I think he plays about probably anywhere between 15 and 20 snaps tonight, which is right around 33 to 40% of the snaps. And I think there's upside for a lot more. He went from 0 snaps to 19% of the snaps last week. So I think there's upside there at $400. If you're looking for that sneaky play below $1,000, I think he's viable. All right, let's start from the top now. James Conner. Look, Cincinnati has allowed 408 rushing yards so far this year to running backs through 3 weeks and 4 rushing touchdowns. This is obviously a fantastic spot for James Conner, a guy who has not been good so far this year. But in his defense, look, the Steelers' offensive line has been getting healthy. And now last week, even when he was not good again, and also you have Mason Rudolph, so it's a lot easier to stack the box against a guy like Conner, who's sort of a dual threat but not being used so far that way this season. You didn't have Jalen Samuel touch the ball at all last week. You only have the rookie Benny Snell Jr. have 5 touches all season, and 5 touches all season. And for the most part, or 5 snaps. For the most part, Benny Snell Jr. has looked terrible, so he's no threat to take more touches away from James Conner. And seeing that Jalen Samuel didn't touch the ball last week, even though he played about a quarter of the snaps, is also bodes very well for James Conner. So yes, there is interest in James Conner. Juju, similar price point. This is the decision you have to make. Do you like James Conner against a weak Cincinnati run defense dating back to last year, where he should have the majority of the touches in this backfield as a favorite? Or do you like Juju at the same price point against a insanely weak Cincinnati pass defense, although be it in the slot, they're a little bit stronger than they are on the outsides? I think I lean James Conner. I have them both as yes because I'm going to have shares of both of them. I think I lead James Conner because, he is a favorite in this game with no real competition for touches, and I like the overall matchup for him on the ground better than Juju at that price point. If Juju was 9,400, well then Juju's a better play there in my opinion. Not to say, I think I prefer it like 60-40 Conner. It's very close. Juju has the obvious higher upside as he'll be running deeper routes and just have more overall, I would say, upside and opportunity in his targets because they're more downfield, make up a lot of ground easily. And we know Juju is a big play wide receiver. So I think I prefer James Conner there barely. Juju, though, he's been seeing about 2/3 of his snaps out of the slot this year. We know how beneficial that is. We know that Juju is a slot receiver. They haven't changed anything there. And then obviously you have the step down from Ben Roethlisberger to Mason Rudolph, which I don't think completely crushes Juju Smith-Schuster, but I do think it is going to make him less of the priority, make him less of the 15 target a game guy when you see some of those games when they need to be throwing. And that's what we've seen so far. We've seen sort of a balanced approach. We've seen 12 targets to Juju, 9 to Deontay Johnson, 6 to James Washington. Juju's still the main receiver on this team through 2 weeks of Mason Rudolph, but it's not overshadowing. It's not by far and away. He's seeing 6 targets a game compared to the 5.5 or 5 that Deontay Johnson is seeing a game. So I prefer James Conner there, but obviously both are in play. I have interest in both quarterbacks because they're both below $10,000. We usually don't see this. Mason Rudolph has not honestly done that great from everything that I've seen so far this year. He's not looked that good, surviving really from defensive play and a few big plays per game. But for the most part, he has not looked consistent. But he gets a very beneficial matchup against Cincinnati. Andy Dalton, on the other hand, gets a little bit of a stronger or a more difficult matchup. Look, the Pittsburgh pass rush has been there. Their run defense has been there. Their coverage has not been there, but it's also been Joe Hayden's been hurt. They didn't have TJ Watt to start the season. They just acquired Minkah Fitzpatrick. So this secondary is going to get better, especially when you pair that with TJ Watt coming back and having the pressure in the front be healthier. And then you pair into it, just in general, that they're a sound favorite here by about 3.5, 4.5 points. I would say, though, that Zach Taylor's offense, I think, is legit. for the Bengals. I think that Andy Dalton, I think that John Ross, and especially if they get A.J. Green back, Tyler Boyd, and now they're using Auden Tate, I think this passing game is legit. I think a lot of things remind me of what you see. You see jet sweeps with Tyler Boyd. That's very similar to what they do with Robert Wood. You see the similar routes for John Ross as Brandon Cooks gets. Very similar to what you're seeing or saw from the Rams the last season or two. So I think I do prefer Andy Dalton if you had to pick one. Mason Rudolph has the easier matchup, but Andy Dalton, the game script says play from behind, which what I would consider Andy Dalton definitely has the better offensive coordinator in my opinion right now. Tyler Boyd, we already touched on one in depth. I prefer Deontay Johnson slightly over James Washington. It's not like I don't like Washington tonight. If I'm playing 10 lineups, I probably have 4 with Deontay Johnson, 3 with Deontay Johnson, and then like 1 less with James Washington or 2 less. It's very close, very similar in price point. But we see so far that the outside receivers, so Washington and Deontay Johnson, these guys have the best opportunity to torch Cincy. Cincy's been torched on the outside for a touchdown a week so far. Last week we saw Deontay Johnson kind of take over as a starter in the X role for this offense, which is a very favorable role. That's the role that Mike Wallace played. That's the role that Antonio Brown played in this offense, and then Juju is taking over that opposing role, which the wide receiver 2 role for just this offense in general has been fantastic. So technically right now, Juju is playing sort of that wide receiver 2 role. He's not the X receiver as he's lining up a lot in the route or in the slot for many of his routes. So I prefer Deontay Johnson slightly. He's seen 9 targets with Mason Rudolph, which is nothing crazy, but 6 targets for James Washington. Obviously a super small sample of 2 games with this guy. But I do prefer Deontay Johnson, the rookie that looked good last week, caught a touchdown. Auden Tate, yeah, this is a really good spot, $4,800 Auden Tate. This is a really good spot. Look, you factor in his price point. You factor in that last week, Damian Willis, a guy who started this season as a starting wide receiver, right? The starting guy in 3 sets with Tyler Boyd and John Ross, only played last week 4 snaps, all in special teams. He's done. It's Auden Tate's season. Auden Tate in the preseason has looked fantastic, and he ran 33 routes last week, 89% of the snaps. He's a playmaker by far over Alex Erickson. Alex Erickson is not going to be taking snaps away from Auden Tate. It seems very much so that Auden Tate is going to be the wide receiver 3 who sees this field for at least 70-75% of the snaps tonight, with the upside of close to 90 like last week. He ran 39% of his snaps last week out of the slot, which again, Steelers are going to put linebackers on slot wide receivers. So if out of every 2 out of 5 snaps you're going to get Auden Tate in the slot, that's just a mismatch by far. Auden Tate's a very athletic wide receiver who's probably very underrated, and it was nice to see him sort of break out last week a little bit. I have a lot of interest in Auden Tate at that price point. I do think he's captain viable. I think he's viable at any spot, your flex, your captain, and cash in tournaments. I really only recommend you playing tournaments for a showdown slate. But $4,800 Auden Tate, way too cheap tonight. I really like the upside there, and I can't stress enough how good of a matchup it is for these talented wide receivers to go into the slot just in general, and now they're going to face a linebacker instead of a cornerback. Yeah, you also throw into it that I already said that I prefer the offensive coordinator and Zach Taylor by far for Cincinnati here, and they're going to be in a game script that says at least trailing, so more pass attempts. I do like Auden Tate. I do like Tyler Boyd. That's why I have a little more interest in Andy Dalton over Mason Rudolph, because if you've kind of got the sense of it, James Conner for Juju over me slightly. Nothing major there. Deontay Johnson over James Washington. But then for me, it's Auden Tate for the price savings over Deontay Johnson. It's Tyler Boyd over all of those guys. So I'm preferring the passing attack of Cincinnati for a few reasons already stated, which that gets me more to Andy Dalton than it gets me to Mason Rudolph if I'm building out lineups that correlate. We touched on Zach Gentry, Gio Bernard. So here's the thing. I don't have interest in Joe Mixon. He's way too expensive in my opinion at $8,800. This is a good Steelers run defense, top 5 right now in the league. And the Bengals offensive line plays bottom 10, and they're giving up a top 10 stuff percentage. But then not even that. People don't realize, I don't think, how close. They've played the exact same amount of snaps, Gio Bernard and Joe Mixon. The exact same, I think 102 snaps, 49% of the snaps each this year. And then like the other 1% or 2% of the snaps have just gone by the wayside. But, yeah, that's not a good spot to pay $8,800 for a running back in Joe Mixon who has looked bad, who is not running routes this year, who seems to still be injured, is playing behind an awful offensive line. Like, if I'm taking a chance on anybody, it's the guy who's $5,000 less, who, in my opinion, well, for sure, he's playing the same amount of snaps for $5,000 less, running behind the same line. He's running way more routes. He's running about 10 more routes so far this season, which is 3.5 per game, which in my opinion is way more, right? Running an extra route per quarter. There's just way more upside there for Gio Bernard. So same snaps, running more routes, probably the higher upside player in terms of being involved in the passing game. in a game script that says you're going to be trailing against Pittsburgh. So Gio Bernard, slight interest at that price point. It is interesting, but no interest in Joe Mixon in the same backfield. I just don't know the price point. I don't know why the difference is so great on these guys who are pretty comparable right now, in my opinion. James Washington, definitely in play. Like me saying I like Deontay Johnson better, that's more of a preference thing. They're similar price point. Deontay Johnson, in my opinion, seems to be the more explosive receiver. I mean, James Washington, sure, he's looked good in the preseasons. He's getting a lot of air yards like through the first 2 weeks of the year. But Deontay Johnson led the team last week in air yards, saw bulk targets, 9 in the last 2 weeks with Mason Rudolph, got in the end zone. But the main thing here is, like, I think he's just more talented than James Washington. Like, if James Washington was that talented, he wouldn't have been buried on the depth chart playing in the preseason for the past 2 years. That's not to say, though, that I'm not going to have Washington. Again, if I had 10 lineups, I'd probably have 4 with Deontay Johnson, 5 with Deontay Johnson, and then 3 or 4 with James Washington. It's very close. Defenses, I'm just always going to put an X by. I think that the Steelers' defense is the one that I would rather have here, but you have to keep in mind that Mason Rudolph is playing quarterback right now with not a ton of upside, in my opinion, for the against the Bengals. The problem there is the Bengals stink against the run, they stink against the pass, they stink at getting pressure, they stink at tackling. They're just a bad defense overall, so playing them, you're just pretty much hoping that Mason Rudolph makes a mistake or two and it gets taken back to the house. So I think both defenses are in play. The Steelers are more expensive for a reason. I like them a little bit more as a favorite here. And then the last one, CJ Uzomah. He's $1,400. He's definitely in play. I don't have interest in Tyler Eifert. Eifert's only running 9 more routes, so 3 more routes per game than CJ Uzomah, but he's almost $4,000 more expensive. And Uzomah's on the field for 60% of the snaps compared to Eifert only being on the field for 41% of the snaps. So Eifert's definitely the better red zone target for sure, but I'm not paying $5,200 for a guy who probably steps on the field for 33% less of the snaps tonight than Uzomah and sees similar targets. Eifert upside probably more times than not is 3-4 targets tonight. Uzomah's upside probably more times than not is 3-4 targets tonight. So give me the guy who's on the field more. Give me the guy who's running very comparable routes, but you get to save $3,800 in Uzomah. Not a ton of interest there. He's $1,400. If you ask me who do I prefer, Uzomah or Zach Gentry, it's probably Uzomah for $1,000 more because it's still very cheap. But I do think Gentry is sneaky for his $400 price tag in terms of a guy who is, 5% owned, 4% owned, maybe less in Gentry, and takes down the slate because, again, there are the top 2 receiving tight ends right now for the Steelers are down. He is the next best receiving tight end. And then obviously they trade for Nick Vannett, who's going to be more so over the blocker. So that's where I'm at right now on this slate. John Ross is, of course, a good play, or is, of course, a good player. He has a lot of fluky touchdowns this year. He's going to be on the outside against Joe Hayden, and then he's also going to have to face Minkah Fitzpatrick in the secondary. Really hard to toast Minkah Fitzpatrick on a deep bomb, so not going to get there. Talked about why I don't want Tyler Eifert. Just the price point compared to him and his other tight end in Uzomah, who's playing more, is just weird to me. Nick Vannett, not going to get there at $4,200. More of a blocking tight end. The kickers, I always just put as no. There's interest if you want to get there. Like last night, you saw 4 field goals go in for 1 kicker. He's needed in a winning lineup. Jalen Samuel, no interest at his price point. Just doesn't play any snaps last week. That's not great. Dante Moncrief, no snaps last week. Ryan Switzer only played 5 special team snaps last week. So those are the main guys that people might say, but I want to play this guy. Johnny Holton, 10% of the snaps all year. Only ran 11 routes so far this year. These teams are only running 3 wide receivers deep for the most part, so don't try and get sneaky down there. If you're going to get sneaky today, I would recommend doing it with tight end CJ Uzomah or Zach Gentry and or Gio Bernard, a sort of the sneaky, cheaper plays. So that's where I'm at. Really like Tyler Boyd, really like an Auden Tate today, and this whole Bengals passing attack as underdogs. And that's where I'm at. So yeah, thank you. I appreciate you tuning in. My name is Sal Vetri. You can follow me on Twitter at SalVetriDFS. You can look down below for Patreon exclusive content for the NFL season on a monthly basis. There will be NBA content as well very soon on this channel. Cannot wait. In the description as well as some free strategy guides and also my merchandise, t-shirts, DFS related stuff, not just my name on it. I know nobody wants to wear my name on it, but pretty cool shirts. You can check them out down below. Hoodies as well. I have some on the way for myself. So thank you for tuning in. Hopefully you bring something tonight. Hopefully you bring something this past week on this channel. Throughout the week, I will have videos, picks, I'd say. It's mainly just analysis. First look videos, Thursday Night Football, and then I'll be on Uzomah Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday at 11 a.m. So thanks for tuning in. Make sure to hit the like button. Make sure to hit subscribe if you're still watching. Peace out, gang.
Hey, hold up. 1 second. Check out this page. If you haven't yet subscribed, hit the subscribe button, all right? And if you're interested in Patreon, if you're not already a Patreon, you can hit that button on Patreon, become a Patreon. It will take you right there. You can also check me out on Twitter at SalVetriDFS. And hey, if you're interested, this next video that's about to pop up, why don't you check it out as well. See ya.